Let's begin.
Pie Jesu Domine, dona ies requiem. Oh, hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Been dying to know who's behind the mayhem at the lake these past few months? Want to know the secrets lying in wait just beneath the surface? Get ready for Doughboy420's epic conclusionary tale that he likes to call Locust Lake, Cult of Locusts, Part 2.
Becky, Alexia, and Dan listened to the screaming upstairs, and they quickly decided that they had better go up and check it out before they were stuck with no escape. A monster beneath them, and something unknown above them. Quickly, Dan made his way up the stairs and opened the basement door to peek out into the house. The music was still thumping as people ran around screaming. Dan even witnessed one girl stumble past the cracked door, holding her stomach as blood gushed out of it. Then he watched a man back up into a corner before he began picking up random bottles and cans, whatever he could find to throw at something beyond the wide doorway of the next room. Then, the attacking figure came into view from around the corner. It was a large, beastly figure, a monstrous man, clad all in black, aside from a ragged, blood-drenched, tan-colored coat that hung down a bit beyond his waist. He wore a crudely made ebon hood over his head, with a ragged, stitched smile across his face, along with an X that was sewn into one eye. The large man looked as if he'd been through a war zone. Rips, cuts, tears, shreds, scorch marks, bullet holes. All of these things and more covered the large man's body. He wasn't human anymore. The skin on his hands could be seen sticking out from beneath his coat, a sickening gray color and crawling with maggots. The poor man screamed in terror as the beast with the stitchwork mask, Casper Stoical, slowly approached him, completely unfazed by anything the man hit him with. Then Casper gripped the man about the side of his neck and spun him sideways, to slam his face directly into the wall, where there hung several coat hooks, one of which was forced through the face and out of the back of the skull of the poor man, who was then left hanging there as the butcher of Locust Lake moved on to his next victim. Dan slowly shut the door behind him as to remain unseen by the beast upstairs. He locked the basement door behind him and quickly made his way back down the steps to the girls.
"What is it?"
Becky asked, to the obviously shaken Dan.
"He's real and he's upstairs,"
Dan said calmly, a shocked look on his face.
"What? Who is?"
Becky asked. Alexia remained silent, still processing the death of her boyfriend, Ryan.
"It's Casper frickin' Stoical,"
Dan said in disbelief of what he had seen. Alexia looked up at him, tears still in her eyes, but she too was in disbelief of what Dan had just told them.
"Are you serious?"
she asked, but he didn't have time to answer. Suddenly, a man's body came crashing through the basement door, where he tumbled and folded with several sickening snaps on his way down the steps before coming to rest in a broken mass at the bottom. This was followed by a teenage girl running down the stairs screaming, hoping for an escape, but there was no way out for her down there. Casper hulked down the wooden stairs after her, The 3 survivors attempted to hide behind some boxes and shelves as the girl desperately sought an escape. The butcher of Locust Lake then reached up and pushed a large shelf over onto the girl, crushing her beneath its weight, but leaving her alive, unable to move. This allowed Casper to retrieve a large mason jar that had fallen from the shelf and then proceeded to use the jar to smash the girl's face in with several heavy blows before the jar broke in his hand and impaled the girl's lifeless corpse through the face. While the beast was busy murdering his latest victim, Dan, Becky, and Alexia had slipped past him and managed to sneak their way up the stairs. But they weren't home free just yet. They still had to get out of the house, and Casper was not far behind them. The trio made a break for the door, but were stopped dead in their tracks when a tall figure, clad all in black, stepped out from around the corner of the front door ahead. He wore a wooden mask that clung tightly to his melted skin. It was Jacob Treagle, the monster of the Black Woods. Something had drawn them both here, whether it be the sound of partying teenagers or something darker. The 3 survivors now had to deal with these 2 new threats. Dan spun around the corner of the banister and waited for the 2 girls to move up the stairs and around him. Quickly, the 3 of them ran up the stairs, and Jacob would have followed after his first sight of his next kill, but he was cut off by a young man running through the living room toward him in an attempt to escape from Casper. Jacob grabbed the boy and tossed him back into the room where he had come from, following shortly thereafter him. The monster of the Black Woods then reached up above the fireplace near to where the boy had landed, where he found a fairly large taxidermy shark that had been killed and stuffed long ago. Jacob then drove the stuffed shark's mouth down over the face of the boy before forcing the jaws closed with a force that was probably similar to an actual shark bite. The teeth slicing through his face as the boy screamed in terror before he was silenced when the jaws finally snapped closed around his skull. While the monster was busy reenacting Jaws, Becky, Alexia, and Dan made it upstairs. They were cut off from any possible escape, but they could hide and maybe make it out later. So, that is what they did, making their way into one of the back bedrooms of the house. They hid in the darkness and listened to the screams from the floor below and to the sound of footsteps running back and forth down the hallway outside of their locked door. It was quite some time before the sounds of terror outside the door died down. The remaining 3 of them believed that probably most of the partygoers had been butchered by the demons in the house. Then, the silence was broken when voices could be heard once again outside the door. Familiar voices. Alexia stood up and began to call for help, but Becky quickly jumped to her feet and wrapped her hand around her friend's mouth.
Shh,
she said quietly.
I don't see their bodies.
A man's voice spoke.
You don't suppose they escaped, do you?
Another young man said. No way. The Locusts were here before they even got out of the mine. I'm sure of it. The first voice spoke out once more.
We better find them. Otherwise the Order is going to be furious.
The second man spoke again. The knob of the door the 3 survivors were hidden behind began to rattle. Dan had locked it behind them upon their entrance, but this was not their home territory, and a locked door does little good against the ones that have the keys. The door clicked and unlocked before being swung open slowly. The 3 of them didn't give their 2 enemies any time to react. With a scream, Becky dove forward out of the darkness of the room, holding a mop stick in hand that she expertly drove the end of the handle directly into the eye socket of a robed man, driving him violently backward against the wall before Dan, too, took action, grabbing another younger cultist by the hood and pushing him downward into a knee before throwing him to the ground and climbing on top of him. The two men struggled on the ground, each of them throwing fists at each other and bloodying up the other, before Dan drove the man's face down into a bucket of dirty mop water that had been in the room that they were hiding in, a fairly large bathroom.
What the fuck?
Alexia said, pointing to the dead man laying on the ground, with a broom handle dangling lazily out of his eye hole.
That's Edward Croup!
Alexia said in shock.
Who's Edward Croup?
Becky asked.
He's a local criminal defense lawyer. His face is plastered on billboards all around the county.
Alexia answered, still in a bit of shock.
What about the other guy?
Dan asked, looking down at the corpse of the man that he had just killed.
What?
Alexia said, pulling back the hood of the younger man.
That's the fucking carpenter that worked on my parents' house last month. Who else is in this? The Pope?
She fearfully joked.
We'll worry about that later. Right now, we should probably get out of here.
Dan said, looking around to make sure the coast was clear.
Wait,
Becky said.
I have an idea.
It wasn't long after that the three of them saw the blinking red and blue lights of a police car outside, and for once they were happy to see the boys in blue. The trio scrambled to get outside, where they were greeted by the bright flashlight of not a boy in blue, but a woman.
Get down on the ground!
The woman yelled at them, and quickly they did as they were told, which was followed by the sound of several pops of gunfire as the officer shot at the advancing Casper Stoical behind them. It did little to stop him, but it bought enough time for her to give out a second command of,
Hurry up and get in the car!
The three of them jumped up and ran as fast as their legs would carry them toward the officer ahead of them. As they passed her and climbed into the back of her cruiser, she fired off a few more shots into the advancing demon before she too climbed into her car and sped off down the road.
Are you kids all right?
The officer asked them.
Yeah.
Dan answered, still shaken by the ordeal that they had just undergone.
Yeah, thank you, officer.
Becky said.
Sheriff.
The woman replied.
Huh?
Becky replied in question.
Sheriff, I'm the newly elected sheriff.
She said with a smile.
You're Gemma Hart?
Dan asked.
The one and only.
Sheriff Hart replied.
Thank you for getting us out of there.
Becky said.
Just doing my job, Rebecca.
The sheriff spoke.
Huh?
Becky said, a bit confused.
Just doing my job.
Sheriff Gemma Hart said.
No, my name. You said my name. I didn't tell you my name.
Becky said, staring at the sheriff through the caging that blocked off the front seats from the back. The sheriff sighed as she began to slow, making their way down the hill toward the camp.
Let us out.
Becky said, reaching over to grab the handle of the door, but it did nothing.
Unlock the doors and let us out.
Becky demanded.
You know I can't do that, Becky.
Sheriff Hart said, looking up into her rearview mirror, smiling back at the college students in her back seat.
How the hell do you know my name? What do you want from us?
Becky yelled at the sheriff.
You'll find out soon enough. Now hush up back there.
The sheriff spoke as she turned onto the dirt road leading up to the closed-down Forest Trails State Park. But the locals knew the place by a darker, more sinister name. Locust Lake. The trio screamed and pleaded for Gemma Hart to release them in their captivity. But the cruiser finally stopped beside the damned Locust Lake, the namesake of the cult that now once again had them in their clutches. Then, out of the darkness appeared several robed figures, all of them walking into the police cruiser's headlights so that they could easily be seen.
Come on,
Sheriff Hart said.
The woman of the water is waiting for you.
She said with a smile, getting out of the car and moving back to the door, so that her captives could get out. The rest of the cultists surrounded the cruiser as the door was opened, allowing the 3 young students to exit the vehicle. "Hello." Old Mr. Shaw welcomed them happily.
Let us go!
Dan yelled in defiance. "Oh, young man, you know you are part of something far more glorious than yourself. I must insist that you stay to witness the glory of the Locusts." Amadeus Shaw answered.
You're sick.
Rebecca spoke up. "No, my dear. It is my eyes that are opened. The Locusts are forever. The Locusts are eternal. And with their power, I too will be forever." Mr. Shaw spoke up. Becky laughed. "What's so funny, young one?" Mr. Shaw asked.
Wow, not only are you out of your damn mind, but you're gullible too.
Becky laughed at the man. "Laugh now, my dear. It is the last time you'll have the chance." The old toy store owner smiled.
If you think this place will let you have that kind of power that easily, you're kidding yourself. Hey, I have a unicorn for sale. You interested?
Rebecca spoke up. "A defiant young lady, aren't you?" Mr. Shaw said. The silence around them was then broken by the sound of a raspy breathing in the forest. The cultists moved to the side as a figure of darkness emerged from the woods beyond them. It was a woman, clad in torn office clothing, her jaw hanging agape and broken off to the side a bit, giving her a kind of devious and unnatural smile. The woman jerked back and forth unnaturally, shifting between the trees. Then, before any of them knew it, she shot forward in a blur and was mere inches from Becky's face. Becky screamed and attempted to flee, but she was held in place by several cult members. The broken woman before her was the insidious Dr. Clark, one of the many demons created by the lake, and yet another locust in the eyes of the cult. Dr. Clark shifted her head back and forth, inspecting the girl held like a sacrifice before her. The sinister woman's lips curled upward in a smile at the sight of the girl.
Please, don't hurt me.
Rebecca mumbled at the demon in her face, the putrid smell wafting from her, causing her to become physically ill. Dr. Clark giggled a bit before saying,
"Oh dear, I'm not going to hurt you."
She then turned to Dan and spoke once more.
"But you, on the other hand..."
Dr. Clark smiled and lunged forward to attack Dan with clawing hands. He flinched and clenched his eyes closed, fully expecting to die in that moment, but then nothing happened. Dan opened his eyes to find Dr. Clark hovering inches away from him with a kind of bewildered look in her sickly-looking eyes.
What?
Dr. Clark asked in confusion, before then turning and lunging toward Alexia, who had rendered much the same reaction as Dan, and just as before, Dr. Clark was unable to advance any further. Dan then retrieved something from his pocket, a piece of tattooed flesh still covered in blood, one of the 3 that had been removed from their owners. The first when Becky bit off of Mr. Morton, and the other 2, they had been cutting off the other cultists that the 3 had defended themselves against.
"Can't do shit against this, can ya?"
Dan said with a smile. Then all hell broke loose as Becky elbowed her captors in the ribs to escape their grasp, before she punched Dr. Clark directly in her broken jaw. This caused the bottom of Dr. Clark's face to explode into a red mist of blood and decay as she let out a scream of pain from the bottom of her throat. The cultists all stood around, shocked in what had just happened. She'd actually managed to injure the Locust. She actually managed to cause the Locust pain. Becky, Dan, and Alexia all managed to break free from the grasp of their captors as they watched one of their gods collapse to the ground in pain, her jaw and face slowly reforming with a mass of darkness. The 3 of them just ran as fast as they could up the mountain. They didn't want to stop, not even when their chests began to hurt from exhaustion and they were completely out of breath. Then they came across an old cabin along the trail, where they finally came to rest. There, they leaned against the railing for support in order to catch their breath, and when Alexia finally was able to breathe, she spoke up, shocked and wondering how the hell Becky was able to do all that.
I don't know. I think it was the tattoo.
Becky replied, holding up the bloodied bit of flesh that she had clenched in her fist. The same fist that she had used to attack Dr. Clark.
Do you think you killed her?
Dan asked.
No, I don't think we can kill her, or any of those things. But we can hurt them, and if we can hurt them, we have a chance.
Rebecca spoke up, feeling a bit more empowered and hopeful that maybe they could get out of this alive. The three of them then heard twigs snapping down the path. Someone was coming. Quickly, the three hid in the darkness and listened while the footsteps and voices approached.
Come on out, kids. You can't escape. These are the Black Woods. These are his woods. A little piece of skin isn't going to protect you forever. It will rot and decay. Maggots will eat it away until there's nothing left to protect you. You will die out here. So, why don't you come with us? And maybe we can make this quick.
A man's voice spoke loudly from in front of the cabin.
You really think that's gonna work, William? Didn't you tell your congregation that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar?
An older woman spoke quietly beside him.
Gwendolyn, hush. This is a new flock, and this is a new sacrifice.
The older man spoke. Dan covered his mouth, nearly gasping in shock at the realization of whom he believed to be just a dozen or so feet away from him. It was Father William Canfield, the priest from the church his parents had attended since he was born. And Gwendolyn? That was the name of the nice little old lady that played the organ at the church. Dan realized then that this was true. No one in the area could be trusted. Anyone could be in on the madness that they had been unwillingly thrown into. Dan reached down beside him at the back of the cabin and grabbed a 2x4 that was laying beneath the deck. Wood left over from some unknown project. He knew that if they came around his way, that he would have to use it to defend himself. He heard the sound of footsteps slowly approaching him from around the corner of the cabin, but before the cultists had a chance to find him, he yelled and jumped out from around the corner, swinging the board swiftly with one strong swipe to the side of the priest's head. The board stuck into his temple, with the nails sticking out of its side, causing blood to slowly run from his nose and out from beneath his eye. Gwendolyn screamed in terror and ran off into the darkness as William fell to his knees and collapsed onto his side, convulsing a bit on the ground.
Come on,
Dan said to the other two, still hiding in the darkness. Becky and Alexia emerged from their hiding places, and together, the three of them began moving as quickly as they could through the darkness of the forest, down toward the road. There were no paths, just thick forestry that all rolled downhill. After a few minutes of running downhill, getting smacked in the face with tree branches, the three of them found themselves in the backyard of an old house. They were crazy for living that close to Locust Lake, but the lights were on and someone was home. Quickly, they ran to the nearest door that they could find and started pounding on it, hoping that someone would hear their cries. Soon, a young guy in his 20s answered the door.
What the hell is going on?
The young guy with shaggy, blonde hair asked. The three of them pushed into his house and locked the door behind them.
Dude, what the fuck?
The young guy spoke.
I'm sorry. There's a bunch of crazy people after us. Please help.
Becky begged them.
Who's after you?
The blonde guy asked again.
What's going on?
Another guy asked as he entered from the living room where there were a few other people. 3 more 20-something-year-old boys and 2 girls, along with a hefty amount of lingering smoke in the air. And from all the mixed smell of skunk and gingerbread, you could easily tell what had been going on there.
Please, they're after us. You have to hide us,
Alexia said.
What are you talking about? Who?
The blonde man asked. They were all startled by the sound of a heavy fist pounding upon the door continuously, so hard that the wall around it shook. Picture frames fell off the wall and people's keys rattled on their hooks.
Who the fuck is it now?
The angry blonde guy yelled out as he stormed toward the door, the smell of whiskey on his breath. The guy unlocked the heavy door, but didn't have time to open it before it was pushed forward, knocking him backward. There, in the doorway, stood a tall, hulking man, nearly too wide to fit through the frame of the door without turning sideways to get through. A beast of a man with a stitchwork mask and a dirty tan coat over his black-clad body. It was the beast Casper Stoical. The second man stupidly jumped forward and pushed Casper, attempting to knock him back out the door.
Who the fuck do you think you're messing with, punk?
The man yelled as he attacked the butcher before him. Casper pulled the man outside and slammed him down onto the front deck of the house. The demon then reached up near to him where the owner of the house had been working on his bicycle. There, Casper's large, dirty hand grasped the bike chain upon the cardboard box beside the bike. The beastly man then wrapped the bike chain around the screaming man's neck and yanked backward. By the time that the other people in the house had gotten out the front door in an attempt to stop the murder of their friend, it was too late. Casper yanked his hands back and forth, sawing the bike chain into the boy's neck, turning his screams into gurgles, and then into silence. The 2 girls in the doorway screamed and ran back inside, followed by the 3 remaining men, Casper following not long after them. The owner of the house, the blonde guy, ducked into his room to find a weapon to defend himself with. The boy with the golden hair spun around to find the beast entering the room behind him. Swiftly, the man reached atop his dresser to retrieve a katana sword with a shining blade, its handle wrapped in a blue bandana.
You come to the wrong house, asshole.
The guy yelled as he lunged towards Casper, driving the blade into and through Casper's rotting body. The man looked down at the open wound that he had freshly created and quickly noticed that it had no effect on Casper, before he was backhanded with a sledgehammer-like fist, sending him flying back toward his dresser. Casper then followed after him, sword still sticking out of him. The man then retrieved a pair of nunchucks and swung full force at the attacking beast in an attempt to possibly do enough damage to get away, but Casper had other things in mind. The butcher reached out his hand and caught the other end of the wooden nunchucks in his grasp before yanking it right out of the man's hand, raising it over his head and pummeling the man's face like a club with the flailing nunchucks. The blonde guy collapsed onto the floor, his face bloodied and bruised from the attack, but for the moment he was still alive. This soon would come to an end, however, when Casper pulled the sword out of his own body and drove it down into the chest of the broken boy. Casper left the man to bleed out as he turned his attention toward one of the girls that was trying to escape, but when she saw that she had been noticed, she quickly ran into the kitchen to hide. Casper followed thereafter, where the girl was backed into a corner on the other side of the table. She screamed and pleaded with him to leave her alone, attempting to use the table as a shield between her and the beast, playing Ring Around the Rosie with him and the table, but he quickly discovered her game and flipped the table onto its side so that he could easily approach the screaming girl in the corner. Dinner was cooking on the stove. A large pot of spaghetti was boiling there beside them. Casper decided to add some meat to the recipe when he drove the woman's screaming face into the scalding hot water. She kicked and screamed, burning water flooding her throat as her face melted away in the water, filling the pot with a murky red goo. her face burning and mixing with the water and spaghetti. Casper was nearly out of the kitchen when he heard a murmured cry come from behind him. He turned around to look for the source of the sound. He swung open the refrigerator door. He ripped cupboard doors off their hinges until finally he heard a person cry out. He swung open one last cupboard to find a tiny guy curled up in there, hiding beneath the sink. The man screamed at the sight of the rotting beast before him, who then snatched him out from under the sink before ripping one of the nearby drawers out of its slot and beating the man over the head with the corner of it until the wood broke and splintered in his massive fist. Casper left the kitchen and stalked through the house in search of his prey. There were 4 more victims left alive in the house: Becky, Alexia, and Dan, and the final girl from the group of people that were found within the house. The behemoth found the former first when he went back into the house, where the garage was. There, he found the 3 had survived his grasp before attempting to move boxes out of the way in order to get to the garage door.
Shit!
Alexia screamed in a panic, working faster and faster to make a path to the door. Then, suddenly, he stopped just a half a dozen feet away from them. The 3 of them continued to clear their way, realizing that the tattoos that they had stolen were now protecting them from all of the unnatural evils in the area. The 3 of them finally managed to make it out of the garage door, where Dan was able to lift the door along its rollers.
Come on!
He yelled to the 2 girls, intending to close the garage door behind them and lock the beast inside. Becky and Alexia scrambled out of the open garage door, and Dan was about to follow after them when he was hit in the back with a heavy weight that sent him crashing to the ground, and this sent his piece of tattooed flesh flying into the darkness of the night outside in the process. The tattoo was able to keep the beasts at bay, but it had little effect on the projectiles delivered from those beasts. Dan rolled over onto his back, halfway out the garage door. He watched as Casper advanced upon him to once again retrieve the item that he had thrown at the man's back. It was a large stamping weight at one end of a metal pole, used to flatten and even out dirt. Casper had thrown it at Dan, and it had hit him square in the back, practically paralyzing him. Becky and Alexia screamed outside the door, not knowing what to do. They just watched as Casper drove the heavy weight down onto Dan's chest several times, breaking and collapsing his ribcage before spinning the thing around to drive the pole end of it through Dan's torso, scooping him up off the floor in the process before swinging him upward into the ceiling, where the other end of the pole pushed through Dan's torso and through the layers of wood in the house, lodging itself steady and pinning Dan's lifeless corpse to the ceiling of the garage beneath the rest of the house. Becky cried and nearly collapsed at the gruesome sight before her. Alexia pulled her away from the carnage, and together the 2 of them managed to escape down the driveway and out onto the road. They discovered that they weren't far from the bottom of the hill, and thus not far away from at least some resemblance of safety. They'd emerged at an old house with a "for sale" sign still freshly in the front yard. The ones that had just been murdered had just bought the house that they would die in. Across from them was an old farmhouse and barn. They were going to go there and look for help, but decided against it when the mailbox in front of the farm read Morton. Instead, the duo made haste for the main road at the bottom of the hill. They ran as fast as they could, knowing that Casper could possibly be just a few steps behind them. The 2 of them were nearly at the bottom when they saw headlights round the corner. They stopped and screamed, waving their arms in a panic to try and get the people to stop and help them. They did stop, but they did not help. Several robed men piled out of a large black van, and together they grabbed the girls, placing zip ties around their wrists and subduing them to bring them back to camp up the road. Becky struggled and fought against her restraints. She was about to let out a scream when a rag was placed over her mouth with a chemical smell that filled her nostrils before all faded to black, and she fell into unconsciousness. Rebecca awoke some time later to find herself unable to move. Her arms and legs hurt as something clung tightly to them, digging into her skin. The girl looked down toward her feet to find that she was tightly tied to a cold stone table that sat at the edge of the lake. The area was just dimly lit by 2 large torches that reflected across the flickering waters. Then, out of the darkness of the forest, the robed figures appeared, all of them slowly approaching her before stopping a few yards away. Then, he appeared, stepping closer to Rebecca than the rest of them. Amadeus Shaw, the ringleader of it all, moved over her to look down into her eyes.
Let me go!
Becky screamed.
You're sick. You won't get away with this.
She yelled out in defiance.
Oh, my dear. But I already have. You see, the ritual started the moment I met you, and all I have left to do is make the cut to complete the sacrifice.
Mr. Shaw smiled.
What the hell are you talking about?
Becky screamed in question.
The first step is to find my sacrifice. A young girl. A virgin, of course. As it always is with these matters. The purity is what brings the power.
Mr. Shaw smiled. Becky laughed.
Well, too bad for you, buddy. I'm not a virgin,
she said in defiance.
Oh, my dear. You can lie to me, and you can lie to yourself, but you cannot lie to your destiny.
Amadeus Shaw spoke again.
The second step was to get your blood, to assure that you were the right one for the position.
He continued. Becky gasped a bit, remembering how she had pricked her finger on the marionette in Mr. Shaw's shop.
Step 3. Scare you beyond imagination.
Mr. Shaw smiled again.
I think it's safe to assume that you have been sufficiently terrified.
The old man joked.
Then, finally, you would have to be betrayed by someone you care about, breaking your heart.
Amadeus spoke calmly.
But no one's betrayed me,
Becky said in confusion.
Hi, Beck,
Alexia said as she came around a corner into Becky's view.
What, Lexi?
Becky asked, completely confused.
Don't call me that,
Alexia said in disgust.
I hate it when people call me that,
she added.
What's going on?
Rebecca asked in hurt confusion.
Oh, come on, don't tell me you're that stupid. Do I have to spell it out for you?
Alexia began.
I didn't take you to the toy shop to get Ryan a present. I just dated him for the image. I'm glad he's dead. Won't have to put up that show anymore. No. I took you there because I knew you'd never even made it past first base with a guy. I took you there because I knew you would make a great sacrifice for our cause. I took you there so my dad could get your blood.
Alexia spoke up.
Dad?
Becky said.
Ugh. Yeah, I never told you my real last name. It's Shaw. Alexia Shaw.
The fiendish girl said with a smile.
And now, all is set for step 5, the final phase before my immortal transcendence.
Mr. Shaw spoke, raising a large dagger above his head, a dagger fashioned from the antler of a deer.
No, please,
Becky said as tears filled her eyes. Then, it was all over. The cult leader drove the deer antler of the knife down into the girl's heart. She gasped as the air slowly left her lungs. She faded and slipped away as she watched red and blue lights begin to flood the area. This was followed by yelling and a hail of gunfire as all the Locusts scattered to get away from the invading SWAT team officers. The young girl that had survived the attack at the house at the bottom of the hill had brought the police swarming to the lake. None of the monsters were found there by police. No Jacob Treagle, no Casper Stoical, no Dr. Clark, and no redcoat creature in the tunnels. All of them had vanished once again into the darkness to leave the cult that worshipped them to fend for themselves against the law. Several cultists managed to escape that night, but some were killed or captured to face charges. Sheriff Gemma Hart didn't last long as sheriff. She would now be spending the rest of her life in prison for the deaths of all those people. And she wasn't the only one. Now that their cultist lawyer buddy was dead, Mayor Leon Smith and the bank owner, Christoph Henderson, didn't have anyone that would defend them against the charges that they faced as being members of this heinous cult. So they too would be going behind bars, and neither of them would be able to handle themselves in prison. The cult was over. Its members were all locked up, dead, or scattered to the wind. The only mystery of that night that investigators couldn't solve: how did Amadeus Shaw die? The medical examiner couldn't find a cause of death. The man was old, but he was relatively healthy, and there was no reason that they should have found him dead at the scene. No one shot him. He didn't have a heart attack from shock or anything. He just died. The police gathered up everything that they could against everyone there. All of the evidence was more than enough to go after anyone in connection with any of these people. All of the dead bodies, the cultist robes, the fingerprints, and even that weird, blood-covered marionette found laying beneath the altar.
Well, it seems that you don't need to go to the lake to find good terror. But if you do, the terrors will find you. But if you think that it's over, there's more secrets at the lake to be revealed. But if you can't wait that long for the return of good fear, make sure to drop in again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.